Hey guys, welcome to TCR. Sid here, thanks for clicking on the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to maintain and keep a healthy and happy flock of birds. One thing you always want to think about with your birds is, do you have proper housing for them to keep them safe from predators at night? And depending on the area that you live in, those predators can vary from things like owls to possums to skunks to coyotes. So you do want to make sure that you have a good, secure pen to put them up at night, to keep them safe, to keep them dry, and to keep them warm. Making sure that you provide some sort of dusting area for your birds, whether it's just a little bit of loose dirt in the ground somewhere under some shade, or if you have a pit like we do for ours that we add our fireplace charcoal to and ash to. You can also add some DE to your birds' dusting area. They love to dust their feathers. It does a lot of things for the birds. Dusting allows the birds to clean themselves, to help prevent them from getting things like mites, and helps them also aerate their feathers. And what that does for the birds, since birds don't sweat, is it helps them cool down, similar to a pig rolling around in the mud. This is also how most poultry clean themselves. Your waterfowl, your ducks, your geese, things like that, they'll go ahead and dip in the water and things. You won't see them dusting as much. You might catch a duck dusting once in a while. I've yet to see my geese ever do it. But your chickens, definitely. They need an area to dust in order to keep themselves clean, cool, and help keep those parasites down. Another thing to consider is, what are you feeding them? You want to make sure that you're giving your birds proper food for what they are, what age they are, and what breed they are. So if you're just dealing with chickens, you want to make sure that if you've just got chicks, you want them on a higher protein diet. You don't want any calcium in their feed if they're being penned up, not able to forage or get any grit in their diet to help break down that calcium that's always going to be found in layer feed. The converse of that is, if you have a flock or you have your babies out with their mom, you do want to make sure that you're providing enough calcium for your birds so that they do have healthy shells and you don't get those soft, I like to call them rubber eggs. A lot of times that's a sign that your birds don't have enough calcium in their feed or in their diet. So you can always save your shells and dry them and grind them up and add them out for the birds to peck at. The ones that are deficient will gravitate towards those more, and you won't ever see your roosters going after the eggshells or anything like that. You'll just see your hens predominantly going after that. Also, check what's in your feed. Make sure that the protein levels are appropriate for the age of your flock, and as well as the calcium levels. If you find one that doesn't have enough calcium in it, you might want to be supplementing with some oyster shell. And you also, if you can't find one that has a high enough protein level, or you notice your egg production has dropped off, oftentimes it's because your birds are not getting enough protein. So I always like to supplement with a little additional feed that I use for my meat birds that's a higher protein base. It's about 20%. And I mix that with my layer feed that I believe that feed is 17% that I have. And I've never really had to supplement with the oyster shell. I have not had a big problem with that with my girls, but you do want to keep an eye on that to see if that's an issue for you. You can always supply extra calcium. So make sure your protein levels are high enough. They are little carnivores, so if you feel that you're maybe having a dip in egg production, try giving them some leftover meat that you've had that you cooked. Provide them with some extra mealworms or some bugs that you can dig out from your garden, some grubs or things, and you might see those egg numbers come back up. Especially during the winter time when egg production is down, I like to bump my protein levels up a hair. Check your birds. Check them over once in a while. Keep an eye on their behavior. Check them for mites. Check their excrement to make sure that it looks healthy and that it's not too soupy and that it's worm-free. Birds can go from being perfectly fine one day, very healthy, to the next day being very lethargic, maybe not wanting to eat or drink, showing signs of almost looks like they're dozing off. I always call it when chickens get that The blinking eye, that's usually a sign that they are literally hours away from death. They don't usually make it till the next day, and they were maybe fine a few hours before. So keep a close eye on your birds. There's a reason they took canaries down into the coal mine. They are very susceptible to a lot of things, and they will die quickly. So you do want to keep an eye on your flock. You do want to make sure that if you do notice a bird that is not acting right, that you separate it immediately so that you can check it over yourself. If you're able to or care enough to, you can always call your vet at that point, or reach out to friends in your community that also keep birds that maybe have had a similar situation. You know, birds get viral issues, they get coughs, they get vent issues, they get egg bound, they get all kinds of things that can go wrong with them. So you do just want to keep an eye on them to make sure that they're healthy, and if you do notice something off, that way you can address it as soon as possible and possibly save that bird and the rest of your flock from becoming ill. Making sure that you have enough room for the amount of birds that you have in your flock. You do want to consider that. You don't want to overcrowd them. A lot of people will get backyard birds and they'll maybe only get, you know, somewhere between 4 to 10 birds, but they'll keep them in one of those tiny little prefab coops and they don't have a real run or area to go around. The tighter area that you keep the birds in, the more likely they are to become aggressive with each other and very unhappy. And the more often you really have to keep an eye on cleaning out their area, because if they're in a small confined area, obviously they're going to be forced to go to the bathroom and, you know, live their little lives in a small space. It's going to be harder to keep them healthy and clean. So take that into consideration. If you're able to free range your birds completely, as I do here, that's great, definitely. And then, you know, your coop size just needs to be big enough that you have enough nesting boxes per the amount of birds. I usually like to figure about 3 birds per nesting box, so that there's a rotation there, so they usually have a good number, so nobody's overcrowded, nobody's laying off in weird places, although they still might do that to you because some of them just will. But something important to keep in mind, that if you are able to do that, if you have more room, the more room you have, the more spread out they'll be, the less aggressive they will be towards each other and towards you, especially if you're keeping roosters as well. So keep in mind the ratio of your hens to your roosters. You want to make sure you have at least 3 or 4 girls to every 1 rooster in your flock. Keep in mind the number of birds that you have and the space that you had in order to keep those birds from getting all aggro and crazy on each other and trying to peck each other to death, because, well, they will. So make sure they have enough room to, you know, spread their wings. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something about keeping your flock happy and healthy today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you get the notifications. Woo.